What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another player breakdown. In today's player breakdown, we will be discussing Ajayi of the Miami Dolphins. Now, at first, I thought everyone kind of had a good idea of what was going on with Ajayi and what his value is. But as we're reading the comment section, we see that some of you guys still are not sure if you want Ajayi or if you don't. Before we do get into this player breakdown first, if you have not checked out our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com, go ahead and check it out today and become a member. We have benefits that last up until draft day and into the season. Also, we do have a special promotion going on from Pro Football Focus, the leader in statistics for the NFL, which is 12.5% off of their Edge packages and 10% off of their Elite packages. Nobody else can provide you this discount, and if you're interested, just go into the description box below and get yourself a copy today. Now, with all that out of the way, let's jump into the player breakdown for Ajayi. Now, Ajayi has been one of those players throughout the offseason that has been marked as either overpriced or a good value week over week. It seems like all the time he's climbing the rankings and then he falls in the rankings. From the NFL draft to training camp to the loss of Tannehill to the signing of Jay Cutler and now most recently the concussion reports. I don't think there is a player with his similar ADP whose popular opinion of him in the fantasy community has yo-yoed so much. Now, while the opinion that the fantasy community has on him changes, the ADP has stayed at least relatively the same. In some leagues, he is going in the late first round, but in most leagues, I see that he's being picked at the beginning of the second. With all that being said, let's just dive into the breakdown for Ajayi. So in 2016, Ajayi finished 4th in rushing yards, coming in with 1,272 yards to go along with 8 rushing touchdowns. Now, through the air, he definitely struggled, receiving just 34 targets for a measly 151 yards on 27 receptions. Regardless of his involvement in the passing game, though, his stat line was good enough for an RB11 finish in PPR leagues. Considering that he wasn't even the starter until week 5, that is definitely something that is quite impressive. But while his season-ending numbers do warrant a high draft pick, people who owned him last year know how boom and bust he really was. We actually labeled him as the Brandon Cooks of running backs. And now looking back at it, the Brandon Cooks of running backs may have even been an understatement. When diving into it further, Cooks had 47% of his yardage in just 4 games, while Ajayi had 58% of his production in just 4 games. Excluding those 4 boom games, he only had over 60 rushing yards in 3 other appearances. So as you can see, basing your opinion on Ajayi strictly off of his production last year as a whole may not paint the same picture. Nobody could actually blame you for avoiding him as an early draft pick if he was going to do the same thing coming into 2017. Obviously, he wasn't very involved in the passing game, and the yardage isn't there in over half your games. That's not a recipe for success on someone who you're potentially drafting as your RB1. So you got to ask yourself, what was the reason he had such good games and then kind of fell off in these other games? Well, the thing is, last year, you can make a direct correlation with Ajayi's success and the health of his offensive line. The Dolphins had 10 different starters on the offensive line last season. Nearly every game, there was a different combination of offensive linemen that he had to work with. The most important position for a rusher in this type of scheme on the Dolphins team would be the center. And you ask yourself, how important is the center in a zone rushing scheme? Why don't you go ahead and ask the Falcons, who signed Alex Mack from free agency from the Browns last year. That helped them move up from an 18th ranked rushing team finish to a top 5 finish in 2016. Now, you can argue that offense was definitely firing on all cylinders, but both Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman played virtually the same amount of games as they did the year before. So back to Ajayi, in games that he did have a healthy offensive line with Pouncey, he actually averaged 130 yards per game and also had 5 of his 8 touchdowns during that span. Then factor in that 4 or 5 of those teams were in the top 13 in rushing yardage allowed. That just shows you the type of upside that he can have if all the pieces are healthy. And that's not to say that Ajayi needs a spectacular offensive line to be great. He just needs them to be good. Pro Football Focus has had the Dolphins' offensive line ranked in the bottom 5 for 3 years now. There's no guarantee that this offensive line will be healthy throughout the whole season, but so far this offseason the line does seem relatively healthy compared to last season. Pouncey has played in both preseason games, so all signs are definitely looking up. One thing that's not in question is Ajayi's ability as a rusher, at least not from us at this point. Surprisingly, he was the 5th most elusive back in the league and ranked 12th in his breakaway percentage. This is the type of player that can force broken tackles and be a big play type of back. There aren't that many backs in the league with this type of big play upside. As a receiver though, Ajayi truly wasn't given a fair opportunity last season. He ranked 39th in the league in targets. In his limited workload though, he did show he can catch, and in college that was something that he did routinely. He actually had a better drop percentage than players like Theo Riddick, Isaiah Crowell, Darren Sproles, and Le'Veon Bell. That's not to say he doesn't have room to improve. His yards per reception were definitely subpar, coming in at 5.6, but this is something that he should see improvement in during this offseason. It's essentially a guarantee he will see an increase in targets and opportunities. Jay Cutler is now signed, and the defenses know that he isn't afraid to air it out. Jay Cutler is also known to be very friendly to targeting the backfield. In seasons where Cutler played at least 15 games, Forte, who was the RB1 for the team, averaged 78 targets per season. When factoring the games that he missed, he basically averaged over 5 targets per game. There were only 2 other backs last season who averaged over 5 targets per game. Those 2 running backs, Le'Veon Bell and David Johnson. Now, I'm not saying he's going to go hyper-focus and target Ajayi that much, but that just goes to show you the type of upside you can project when determining if he's going to see an increased target share this year with Cutler compared to what he would have had with Tannehill. So where do we have Ajayi right now on our draft boards? Ajayi is certainly one of our draft targets. His usage is clearly going to be there, and he has no other capable backs challenging him for snaps. Adam Gase and the Dolphins know running Ajayi is going to be key to winning these football games. In games Ajayi had 16 or more carries, they won 9 of 10 games. And one thing's for sure that we've learned over time, you can't rely on Cutler's arm to win games simply because he makes too many mistakes. Now, depending on what pick you have is really going to determine on if you're going to be able to snag him or not. We have Ajayi slotted out as an early 2nd round pick. Me personally, I have the 12th pick in a draft coming up this weekend, and my dream team top 2 targets would be to grab Freeman and Ajayi. That probably won't happen because Freeman is going earlier in the 1st, but I will certainly take Ajayi with my 13th overall pick. We have Ajayi clearly slotted ahead of Jordan Howard, and that's not to say Ajayi doesn't come with any risk. His success really does rely on the upside and the health of his offensive line. But if you're on the board and it's the middle or back end of the 2nd round and Ajayi's still there, you have to take him. You can't pass up on that upside. Don't think twice about it. Alright everybody, that's going to do it for today's player breakdown on Jay Ajayi. If you like this breakdown, please hit that thumbs up button and let us know who you want us to break down next time. If you're new to the channel, please be sure to subscribe. We thank you all for watching, and we will catch you on the next one.